Hello, lords and ladies of the internet. I'm the King of Candor, and today we're going to be talking about the history of bugbears in fantasy. I know. I just made the Hobgoblin video and said I wasn't going to do this, but you all made some great comments in the comment section and convinced me, so here we are. That video is linked below, by the way, if you want to check it out later. I still kind of dislike bugbears immensely, but I think I have a couple fixes for them that I'm going to show off at the end of the video, so stay around for that. Otherwise, let's get started on the history of bugbears in fantasy. Historically, bugbears are actually very hard to pin down. The best and quickest way to describe them is as an alternate word for a boogeyman. This is because in Old English, the word bug, spelt B-U-G-G-E, was not referring to small insects, but something to fear. Think about how we have the word creepy crawlies, but the word creep is still powerful outside of it. It's very similar, actually. There's a little bit of contention, though, on if that's the true origin of bugbear, because the Old Welsh have a word in bwg, spelt B-W-G, which also means evil spirit or goblin, and then we have an Old Scots word called bogil, B-O-G-I-L, which also means goblin, that sound very similar and occupy a similar conceptual space. Linguists are not sure if these words are all related to each other or came about independently. Regardless of which one of these is the true origin, it got added to the phrase bugaboo, which became boogeyman over time. And the fact that boogie means evil is carried on today by Boogie2988. If you don't know who that is, you're blessed, but he faked cancer for internet clout and money. That should let you know everything you need to about his character. Now, for most of their history, they're sort of an amorphous shadow monster. They lurk under the beds, in your closet, in the woods at night, wherever you don't want to find them. However, they're given a bit of a more solid form in the stories in medieval England. They're also given some magical powers and can scheme in the shadows against God. That's how they're depicted on Bugbears by John Jeffrey. It is an English translation of an Italian play called La Spatara by Antonio Francesco Goranzi. In both stories, the bugbear is a creature of the woods that grants power to those who commit evil deeds for it. An interesting anecdote, this guy is the same author who would help Francesco Berni in his work Tutti I tuofoni, liari, mascaretti o chianti, con associati adi preferenza dal tempo del magnifico Lorenzo Viceo de Medici fino all'anno 1559. I deeply apologize to all my Italian ancestors. I did my best, but you all died before teaching me the language. Notably, these works would actually directly influence the work Faust by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, which is one of the major inspirations for the modern depiction of Satan and the devils who make deals. So, pretty cool origin. Now from here, English doubles down on the bear part, making the bugbears vaguely bear-like entities that exist in the shadows. The real good example I saw online was think about a Yao Guai from Fallout. They live in the woods, have a little bit of magic, and kill people who investigate things they shouldn't, or naughty children. You could already start to see the modern version taking shape here. Unfortunately, this is sort of it until Dungeons and Dragons, so to make up for it, we're going to go look at some bugbear-like entities. As mentioned earlier, bugman and boogeyman are the same terms that can be swapped easily, so using that, I looked for other related folklore across the world. It seems like the 1600s was good eating for bugbears and boogeymen because we have several variations showing up in other historical records. The first one I want to look at is the Bagman or Sackman. This guy exists all over Latin America, including Brazil, and strangely, he also exists in Eastern Europe as well as parts of Asia and Southern Europe as well. He's described as a tall, lanky man that exists in the shadows with immense strength, who grabs children from the night and stuffs them into his sack to take away, usually to eat them. There are other, let's just say interesting stories though about what he does with them that I'm not going to talk about here. Another cool one is the Babu. He is an Eastern Mediterranean and Italian creature known as the Black Man. This is not an African man, which we would call it in modern parlance. It means a man who's wearing all black with a heavy black cloak and a black hood or hat that hides his face. Unlike the Sackman, though, he does not eat children. He kidnaps naughty children and takes them to a horrible and frightening place until they learn their lesson. I often wonder if this guy's related to the Hat Man that allegedly you see when you take too many Benadryls. Our final entry is El Coco. There are many variations of the name depending on the exact Spanish or Portuguese part of the world you're from, but from what I can gather, its name seems to mean brown skull. I had several Brazilian friends attempt to look into this, and they didn't have much luck, but my own personal theory is this is an archaic worm with the form of skull, and this is because the entity is one without a face. Now, I know a lot of you were mad at me for making you hungry for brownies in my last video. You might be looking at El Coco and wonder if there's a connection to coconuts, and you would be correct. Rumor has it that it was named such by Vasco da Gama because his crew saw them and thought they looked like little skulls with the 3 little holes they have in coconuts. Now, if you like the content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video. If you want to hear more, I live stream every Wednesday, and there's a link to Discord in the description below. And here we are at Dungeons & Dragons. It's interesting, isn't it? It's always D&D or Tolkien that all fantasies filtered through. So, the Bugbears that existed originally were in the Greyhawk version of the game. This is slightly after the White Box set, which is the first version of D&D, but still before what we call the first version of D&D. I know, it's very confusing. If we counted correctly, by the way, I think we'd be on the 13th edition of D&D. If you guys want me to make a video explaining, then leave a couple comments so I can see there's interest. Also, if you don't want a video on this and want me to make more history of fantasy videos, let me know that instead so I don't get mixed signals. The original Bugbear, and I'm talking the original one, is this weird, lanky, pumpkin-headed monster you see here. The description calls them goblin giants, which is really interesting, because if you look at the way that this setting is originally, goblin is sort of a class of being. Kobolds were underground goblins. Hobgoblins and orcs are bigger, stronger goblins. Gnolls were actually originally goblin-troll hybrids, and gnomes were possibly elf-goblin hybrids? A lot of this is vaguely hinted at, and it's dropped later for other editions. As the rules become more codified, so does the lore. Bugbears are definitively the largest of the goblinkin, and are noted for having extreme strength and stealthy abilities. Interesting though, they're pretty much only monsters, except for one of those offshoot versions of the game where they're made playable. It's almost an insulting joke there though. This is the same book that made hobgoblins playable in the other video. Eventually though, they were properly made player characters in the second edition of D&D. After the first edition, we start getting some more clear art of them, with their heads becoming more humanoid and the general shape of the bugbear being set. They have hairy bodies and ears that are positioned to look like that of a bear's. They also often have claws on their hands and feet, like a bear, hence the name, Bugbear. Their arms are usually longer and similar to that of a monkey or gorilla. Their fur is often brown, yellow, orange, and black. Lots of naturalistic colors that allow them to blend into the environment better. There are 2 exceptions to this rule, but from here on, we have our Bugbear and he is set in stone. A few interesting things the early editions do is they are sexually dimorphic. This means the men and the women are different to the point where the women aren't fighting at all. They also have the largest societies of all the goblinkin, and greatly benefit from the fact that the only ones of them who do not take penalties in sunlight. This mostly stays the same throughout 2nd and 3rd edition, with their physical appearance going from a more monstrous and ape-like appearance into a human one. We also get clarification that bugbears are not just highly armored, but also have thick personal hides, which provides a small amount of armor as well. Things get a little bit weird in 4th edition, because it seems like they were thrown in out of obligation. Half-assed is probably the way to describe them in this book, and this is the time where the art shows their females and males looking pretty much the same. We don't get much on this until 5th edition, where they now have female-led societies, with the women being bigger than the men sometimes. I'm not really a fan of this change, only because it feels lazy and like they try to give bugbears something, but they gave up partway through. I'm not sure why they're so lacking, considering they have been with the hobby for 50 years. You'd think someone would give these guys some love or a second chance like the kobolds got in 3rd edition. If you're curious about that, by the way, check out my History of Kobolds in Fantasy video, linked right here. Now, I did promise you there are 2 interesting takes from them, so, of course they're both from 3rd edition, my beloved. The first one is the Reptilian Bugbear from Savage Beasts. The idea behind this book was it had a lot of unique monsters and templates. A template goes on top of a monster, making a new creature with minimal effort and a thematic piece through. The Bugbear was taken to show off the Reptilian template, which is supposed to be something that dragons could do to their best followers, or certain snake cults could do. The second Bugbear type is the Chameleon Bugbear. This is a template from the Underdark book that came out later, and it's a result of experimentation in the Underdark. Those dang mind flayers and their shenanigans. The victim, though, is mixed with a chameleon, giving them the ability to blend into their environment, and also a tongue attack, which I find really funny, because the book says the attack is useless, however it helps them deliver spells, but the base Bugbear gets no spells. And I'm not sure why they picked that instead of something like a drow, which gets spells. The final thing I find interesting about a Bugbear actually does come from the first official 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons game. This was at the DandD XP convention in 2008, and during these first games, we have one unfortunate player who was surprised by a Bugbear. It dropped down and strangled him, meaning the Bugbear claimed the first victim in 4th edition, which I think is pretty neat. At this point, I tried to find literally anything in modern fantasy that uses Bugbears, and that's not a D&D derivative, and I honestly found nothing. I looked around and even tried to find some similar creatures, but no luck. Most people will simply opt to use trolls or ogres instead, since Bugbear is not really a word associated with power. However, there's one modern fantasy work that still have what they call a Bugbear. Brace yourselves because you're not ready for this. Welcome to the world of Equestria in the My Little Pony setting. I am incredibly unfamiliar with this setting. However, when doing research for this episode, I found out they have their own version of a Bugbear. This is what they look like, and it's unclear to me if there's just one guy called Bugbear or if it's a classification of enemies. According to the wiki, only one ever shows up on screen at a time. Applejack mentions her uncle fighting several of them. In fact, the entire history of these things is weird because they end up trapped in Tartarus and only released by this evil guy named Discord when he attempts to take over the world. They also are expanded upon in the My Little Pony role-playing game. I never would have thought My Little Pony would show up as an instrumental part of the series, but here we are. Congratulations for all you who had that on your 2024 bingo card. Now, I would be remiss if I did not at least cite the most common use of the word Bugbear, which is similar to Hobgoblin as an annoying thing. Hobgoblin is much more broadly something you can't control, whereas having a Bugbear is more of a pet peeve. It's a small, little annoying thing that upsets you irrationally. When I explained this to somebody in my Discord, they said, "Like pineapple on pizza?" So we had them executed for their crimes. But I suppose if you're one of the heathens who likes pineapple on pizza, people like me who despise it would be having a Bugbear about it. Now for my personal take on them, like I promised. Okay, so conceptually, I really like them for their descriptions of being these almost silent, large, hidden killers, cannibalistic beings that stalk the night. If I was going to use them in other settings, I would just immediately rename them to like Boogeyman or Steal the Italian Babu. Much cooler names, and it'll lead to far less confusion when a bear doesn't show up. As for the relationship to goblin kind, I don't really like that. It seems like all the lore around them simply exists to keep justifying them instead of just removing them. Mechanically, they are just more powerful hobgoblins or weaker ogres. If you want to use the stats, I would 100% just suggest making them Goblin Special Forces, the SEAL Team 6 of hobgoblins. So, what about Enos? I said I would only cover them if I come up with something good, and so I think I have something. It's time to show off one of my unique monsters, the Androphagi. These creatures do not have a head, instead having their eyes on their shoulders and their mouths directly into their stomachs. There are slits in their chest for all their other senses. These are pure hunters, consuming only flesh, with a fondness for sapient creatures. They're often referred to as boogeymen by those who cannot pronounce Androphagi, and for good reason. They are nearly silent hunters, with unnatural bodies that makes them much harder to spot. You know how humans evolved to see faces and things where there are none? These guys evolved to counter that. Their long limbs give them greater reach than that of others, and their bodies contain so many redundancies that they are tough to take down. So quickly, in game terms, this means they have an increased reach, and they are immune to critical hits, sneak attack damage, sleep effects, and other similar effects. They travel in small bands, killing everything they come across and feasting on the remains. Lone Andagi are sometimes encountered in the wild. These are often youths who set out to find new hunting grounds or for some strange coming-of-age ritual. It's unknown if they understand the languages. However, they also have some form of mimicry. This allows them to replicate the sounds of anything they've heard before. One survivor of an Andagi encounter reported the creature sounded just like little Timmy before saying, "Oh, who are you, mister?" I just kept repeating this over and over as it went through the house looking for me, using Timmy's laugh. So, I took the Bugbears' incredible stealth, their strength, their love of cannibalism, and the tribal nature, mixed in some horror, and boom, we got a better version of the creature. Also, their name comes from a Romanized version of a Greek name of a tribe known as the Man-Eaters that Herodotus talks about. Feel free to use them in the game. I think Man-Eaters are pretty dope. That is all for today. Thank you for watching this far. If you enjoyed the content, I'd appreciate if you liked and subscribed. I'm looking forward to your candor in the comments below. Have a great day. I just want to thank everybody who did comment. I was impressed with how much love and dedication you guys had to Bugbears, and I'm really glad I made this video. This is dedicated to all of you guys. Thank you.